Okay, so now you have seen one model, this vector space model, applied to three different recommendation scenarios. The first was the item-to-item recommendation, then the personalized recommendation of item to a user, and you've seen that you can use the same calculation to recommend users for an item. So you have a new item coming in, somebody uploads a new book, a new article, a new photo, and you want to find out which users should I show this to in the timeline or in the recommendation. Of course, there are a lot more recommendation techniques. We'll later see content-based recommendation, and there are, like always, a lot more, but these are a few essential techniques to get you started on recommender systems. There's one interesting problem that you have with all of these recommender systems, which is known as the cold start problem. And the problem is that when you have a new user who is going to a system, then you don't have any information about that user. You don't have this so-called user profile. You don't have any history of previous interests, interactions, what the user bought or watched or was interested in. And similarly, for a new item, it can be difficult to recommend it because nobody interacted with this item yet. Unfortunately, there is not really a general solution to this problem. What is typically done in practice is you could ask a user for some interests. When a user signs up for a system, they go through kind of a onboarding process where they have to say what they are interested in, give some preferences, and then you use this as a first start for recommending. The other solution, which you see on websites like YouTube, if you go to the YouTube webpage and you're not logged in and you don't have any browser cookies, you're using anonymous window, then you get kind of a generic page where you have the items that are the most popular and the currently most watched items. So it's kind of a generic recommendation. And only once you start interacting with something, it can start recommending something to you. So be aware whenever you work with building and deploying a recommender system that you have to deal somehow with this cold start problem. The last couple of weeks, we talked about knowledge graphs and semantic vocabularies. So let's see if there is any connection between what we've done so far and what we are doing today. And indeed, people have been working on using semantic models for user modeling. So the idea is that in these vectors, what we are using at the moment are basically keywords or tags, something like in the case of the movie, the category. But you can imagine we can change this to a URI. We can use a vocabulary, and then we can be a lot more precise in what the user is interested in. And this is indeed used for some semantic recommendation engines. Again, remember the ambiguity you have. With a tag or a label like tree, you don't know what the user is really interested in. Is it the botanical tree or is it the data structure tree? And the more ambiguity you have, the less precise these recommendations will be. And sometimes this leads to very strange recommendations, just because something was ambiguous and didn't really match with what the user is interested in. So that's the first aspect of semantic user modeling and semantic user profiles. You have a lot more precise specification of the interest, because now you know exactly what the user is interested in, like tree data structures or trees that you plant outside in the garden. The second aspect, and this is something that has been going on for a couple of years, but is still a very active debate, is open user profiles. So user profiles where the control lies with the user and not the company. Yeah, you know, all these companies, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, they have very detailed user profiles about you, but they are kind of secret. You cannot really look at them. You can request, if you're in some countries, kind of a data dump, then you get sent a few hundred pages of interactions that don't really help you much. What you would like to do is to be able to take this profile and share it with other companies. So instead of the company owning your profile and you just interacting with it, you would own your profile and then you give access to it to the company. So if you want, for example, to get some recommendations about movies, then you can share your profile in a controlled fashion with another company. So there are some ongoing initiatives to make these profiles both open in the sense that they are owned by the user, shareable between different applications, and controlled by the user. And this is connected with the idea of having it in a semantic format, because if you want to share it, there has to be a clear semantic what an entry in this profile means. So as you've probably heard, this is nothing that's solved easily, because this is not just a technical problem. It's how to get control back from all of these big companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, LinkedIn, how to get control back to the individual user. And this is not just a technical problem. But going back to vocabularies, I'm just mentioning 3 of them here at the moment. You've already seen FOV. So when it just comes to modeling users and the connection between users, this is generally the first vocabulary that people use for modeling. So it's a generic user model, but it doesn't have really a lot of detail about describing user preferences or interests. Another model is GUMO. So that's a generic user model, GUMO, that has a number of classes for modeling the characteristics of users, like personality, emotional states, and so on. And another one that's used for e-commerce applications, for example, is Inteleo. So this has a lot of personalization related entries. So things like user modeling, team modeling, interests, tasks, user preferences, and so on. So if you want to build a semantic model of interests, preferences, and so on, these are 3 starting vocabularies that you can look at. Okay, so much for semantic user profiles. And in the next lecture part, I talk about how to evaluate these recommendation systems. See you then.